In 2012, scientists in the United States carried out an experiment that was considered almost impossible to succeed. They released 8,000 non-native salmon into a river where concrete barriers had just been removed. This entire population was completely empty of genetic memory connected to the new waters. According to every law of ecology, the loss of navigational data should have meant the end of their life cycle, and they should have vanished forever into the ocean. But reality completely overturned modern predictive models. These unfamiliar creatures not only returned at a rate that seemed unreal, they immediately activated a machine of large-scale reconstruction. They directly transported tons of chemical nutrients from the deep sea, altered the core structure of entire plant communities, and used mechanical power to reshape the geological foundation of the whole watershed. So, what navigational system guided a species entirely unfamiliar with this place, allowing it to establish a new hydrological order on its own and surpass every human calculation? Before the energy extraction industry reached the Pacific Northwest, the Elwha River in the state of Washington was one of the most biologically productive hydrological systems on Earth. Its natural length stretched from the icy peaks of the Olympic Range, winding through old-growth valleys and flowing directly into the Strait of Juan de Fuca. At its peak, this ecosystem was the final destination of more than 400,000 Pacific salmon every year. What made the Elwha remarkable was that it supported all 5 commercially important salmon species: Chinook, coho, sockeye, pink, and chum. Among them, the Chinook population here carried giant genetic traits, producing individuals weighing more than 45 kilograms, larger than a fully grown human. Biological researchers called them superpowered variants, naturally selected to possess enough muscular strength to overcome the steep rapids of the Elwha watershed. This migration system functioned like a perfect chemical circulation machine. Salmon were born in freshwater, swam out to the ocean to build biomass for years, and then returned to the exact river where they were born in order to reproduce before ending their life cycle. But this great biological cycle was completely shattered by one act of industrial intervention. In 1910 and 1927, 2 giant concrete structures, the Elwha Dam and the Glines Canyon Dam, were built across the river. Their purpose was clear: to provide hydroelectric power for a booming paper mill downstream. Technical data shows that the combined output of these 2 dams produced less than 19 megawatts of electricity, an extremely modest figure by modern energy standards. Yet, in exchange for that tiny amount of power, the design of both dams included no fish ladder system at all. This mechanical intervention immediately blocked off more than 90% of the Elwha River watershed. This permanent barrier turned 112 kilometers of pristine upstream waterway into an area completely cut off from the ocean. The collapse began at once, but it did not stop at the water's surface. Once the coastline was cut off from the mountains, the salmon population fell dramatically, from 400,000 individuals to fewer than 3,000 by the 1990s. Thousands of fish were forced into the narrow 8-kilometer lower stretch below the Elwha Dam, losing their spawning space and facing an extremely high risk of disease transmission because of overcrowding. On the other side of the concrete barrier, the ecological consequences unfolded silently but with enormous severity. The loss of salmon was not merely a decline in animal numbers, it was the break in a large-scale materials supply chain. In ecology, migratory salmon are defined as a mechanism for transporting ocean nutrients. Their bodies carry huge concentrations of ocean-derived isotopes, especially nitrogen-15 and carbon-13, chemical elements that are extremely rare in inland ecosystems. When hundreds of thousands of salmon bodies decomposed along the riverbanks each year, they supplied direct biological fertilizer to the roots of giant plant species such as Douglas fir and cedar. Over 90 years of being blocked, the upper Elwha entered a state of severe nutrient depletion. Riverside vegetation lost as much as 25% of its foundational nitrogen. Isotope measurements from tree ring cores showed the complete disappearance of marine signatures after the First World War. Plant growth slowed, leaf canopies thinned, and that led to a severe decline in insects, birds, and predators. The Elwha watershed became an undernourished ecosystem. However, the physical damage was not the greatest barrier. The greatest loss was genetic. Salmon find their way home through a process called olfactory imprinting. When juvenile fish move from fresh water to the ocean, their olfactory system memorizes the exact chemical structure of the minerals, vegetation, and sediment of that specific river. After 9 decades of absence from the upper river, dozens of salmon generations had been born and completed their life cycle only in the lower river. The biochemical data of the waters above the dams had been completely erased from their deoxyribonucleic acid. When the United States government decided in 2011 to carry out an unprecedented project, removing both the Elwha Dam and the Glines Canyon Dam to restore the flow, scientists were confronted with a paradoxical problem. How do you guide a living species back to a homeland its ancestors have completely forgotten? This was the moment when research data from Canada was integrated into the project. Fisheries experts in British Columbia, Canada, had long been dealing with similar ecological crises caused by overexploitation and dam blockages. In the process of searching for solutions, they discovered a flaw in the traditional theory of olfactory memory. For many decades, biologists assumed that salmon depended entirely on smell to find their way home. But the latest Canadian data from neurophysiological analysis proved that the navigational structure of this fish group is actually a multi-layer backup system. Along their lateral line and inside their skull are tiny magnetite crystals. This structure functions like a biological compass, allowing them to read Earth's magnetic field and determine direction on a large scale while in the open ocean. At the same time, they possess a mechanism for analyzing the angle of sunlight and the ability to adjust their sense of smell according to different salinity thresholds in the flow. Based on this foundational discovery, a joint United States-Canada scientific team decided to trigger a large-scale intervention experiment. In the spring of 2012, while the giant concrete masses of the Elwha Dam were still being dismantled, they selected 8,000 juvenile Chinook salmon from other unfamiliar river systems. These fish were transported and released directly into the upper tributaries of the Elwha. The entire population of 8,000 individuals consisted of complete outsiders. They had never encountered this river, and their genetic code contained no chemical memory sequence connected to the area. The purpose of the experiment was to diversify the genetic code, in the hope of creating a pioneering population that could restart the ecosystem cycle. Based on the probability models used in modern hatchery management, scientists predicted an extremely low return rate. For a population with no original olfactory imprint, the estimated survival and return rate was below 1%. Releasing 10,000 fish and getting back 100 adults would already have been considered a biological success. But what happened next surpassed every predictive software system in North American hydrology. Only 2 years after release, the biological cycle was complete. The fish from the first experimental release had spent time hunting in the Pacific Ocean, building biomass, and beginning the reverse adaptation process from saltwater back to freshwater, and they did not lose their way. Using a magnetic positioning network and backup biological algorithms, they followed the newly reopened current of the Elwha River. In the first stage of assessment alone, fish counting sensor data recorded the return of more than 3,000 adult Chinook to the upper reaches that had once been completely blocked. The return on release rate reached 37.5%. This was an unreal number in a context where the normal return rate of wild salmon generally ranges from 2 to 3%. This explosive return immediately activated the chemical distribution engine that had been shut down for nearly a century. When the salmon spawned and ended their life cycle, their thousands of scattered bodies became an enormous nutrient supply. Tens of tons of nitrogen, phosphorus, and pure carbon from the ocean were released. Spectral analysis from plant ecology laboratories showed that, within a short period of time, deep ocean nitrogen-15 isotopes appeared densely in the cell membranes of riverside fir and fungal communities. The forest began absorbing nutrients at maximum speed. The increase in plant biomass attracted an explosion in insect populations, which in turn drew back bald eagles, black bears, and otters. But the true power of this species does not lie only in chemistry. They are genuine engineers of fluid mechanics. During the 90 years of being blocked by dams, the structure of the Elwha River had become distorted. Without the movement of gravel and stone, the riverbed hardened, the flow became stretched straight, and all structural diversity disappeared. When the salmon returned, the females began carrying out spawning nest digging behavior. By flexing their bodies to generate extremely strong hydrodynamic force, a single female can overturn and sort tons of gravel on the riverbed in order to find a place to hide her eggs. When thousands of individuals perform this behavior together, they completely break apart the hardened crust of the riverbed. After only a few spawning seasons, this digging process had entirely reshaped the geomorphology of the riverbed. The complexity of the flow surged by 40%. Networks of side channels, deep pools, and new gravel bars continually formed. This increase in physical structure immediately created countless perfect microhabitats for aquatic insects and juvenile fish to hide in, thereby establishing and amplifying loop salmon engineer the habitat. The optimized habitat supports a larger population. The larger population continues expanding the scale of geological reconstruction. Human intervention removed only the concrete barriers. It was this species, carrying its own genetic code, that became the force rebuilding the foundation of the watershed. However, when natural forces are released on such a vast scale, they do not produce a calm and perfect picture. They bring the necessary chaos. What shocked researchers most was not only the numbers, but the speed of genetic transformation. In the freshwater lake zone that had once been blocked off, a population of rainbow trout had been trapped and forced to adapt to inland living conditions for 90 years. But the moment the dams were broken, genetic sensors recorded the reactivation of migration code. These freshwater individuals immediately changed their physiological structure, developed silver, salt-tolerant scales, and swam out to the ocean to evolve back into summer steelhead, a special variant that had nearly disappeared completely from this region. A process of natural selection normally measured across millennia is now unfolding at high speed in only a few generations, adapting in real time to the human era. At the same time, that evolution is matched by the harshness of nature. The enormous biomass from returning salmon bodies arrived so quickly that the system could not process it in perfect coordination. In some localized shallow water zones, mass decomposition reduced dissolved oxygen concentrations, triggering local algal blooms and weakening the survival of other microbial species. This revival also activated conflicts of interest within human society. The mixing of wild fish populations with hatchery fish created strong waves of debate within fisheries management. The commercial fishing rights of industry, the demand for strict conservation, and the historical rights of indigenous tribes began colliding with one another inside an ecosystem that keeps rewriting its own rules every spring. More than a decade after the historic dam removal, the Elwha River has not developed according to any prediction chart drawn in 2011. It is balancing itself in a way that is chaotic, forceful, and full of life. The story began with 8,000 individuals poured into an empty body of water, and what it left behind is the clearest living proof that complex biological systems do not need human microcontrol. They only need mechanical freedom to activate their own genetic code. The story of the Elwha River and those 8,000 outsider fish is not only a local ecological miracle, it is a clear piece of evidence refuting the arrogance of centuries of industrialization. We once believed with confidence that permanent concrete structures, large-scale hydrological blueprints, and technical intervention were the only ways to maintain order on the planet. But nature proved the opposite. The giant biological machine called Pacific salmon did not need humans to save it. It only needed humans to stop creating barriers. The moment the infrastructure foundation collapsed, the DNA chain of life immediately activated its own healing process at breakthrough speed. Chaotic, but operating with absolute efficiency, surpassing every academic prediction model. The observed data from this shocking event has gone far beyond the borders of the United States, placing all of humanity's infrastructure planning strategies at a decisive moment. Use your critical thinking and comment below at a time when thousands of ecosystems across the world are in serious decline because of artificial megaprojects. Should governments continue pouring billions of dollars into patchwork conservation technologies and hatchery systems in an effort to maintain control? Or is the most optimal and effective solution simply this? Proactively remove every core infrastructure barrier, accept the trade-off in energy security, and return the space so that nature can rebuild order in its own original way? What do you think about this paradox? Should humanity continue intervening, or should it return the right of self-determination to the natural environment? Leave your perspective in the comments section below. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next ecological case files. The confrontation between human ambition for control and the power of Earth is still unfolding on a global scale.